Hey there, moguls. It's me, Marshall Silver, your personal millionaire maker. Getting very excited about my brand new show. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm going to broadcast live to you. In the first hour of the broadcast, I'm going to give you content, information for better sex, more money, emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual power. I'll also invite some of my cool multi-millionaire and billionaire friends onto the show to give you more direction, more advice, more strategies and gambits for having it all. The second hour is what I'm most excited about. It's when I get a chance to chat with you. Yes, you. Where you can call in, talk to me, ask me questions. And if you say the secret word of the day, you could win $5,000 cash. At the very least, if you're the most interesting call of the day, you could also win 10 ounces of freshly minted Marshall Silver 999 Fine Silver. All of that and more. Brand new Mercedes-Benz sedan or SUV up for grabs. My personal Rolls-Royce Phantom up for grabs. All the knowledge to get everything you want and so much more. All you got to do is log in to the show to get information about its release coming up. 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, coming to you live from the bunker right here at Studio Money. I'm Marshall Silver, your personal millionaire maker.
Let me bring in our hypnotist, Marshall Silver.
It's Marshall Silver, ladies and gentlemen, the world's fastest hypnotist.
Happy belated Father's Day. You are loved, and you are the reason your children exist. Hey, yesterday was Father's Day, of course, and I had an epiphany, and it's a silly epiphany, of course, because it was mine. And the epiphany was that Father's Day isn't for fathers, because we wouldn't exist without children. So there'd be no Father's Day if there wasn't children, which means Father's Day's for kids. So my kids got up with my wife. They all went off to church. I don't go to church. I love God deeply. I'm not a fan of church. And so I didn't go to church. They went to church. And while they were gone, I was meditating and thinking about my kids and my family and how grateful I am. And I wrote each of them a letter just to say, hey, I love you and I'm so proud of you. And here's the reasons I'm proud of you, and just awesome stuff. So they get back, and we're all having lunch on the balcony, watching the ocean. And I told my son Sterling, I told my wife a joke, and she didn't get it, just flat out didn't get it. And she's smart, and I thought the joke was easier to get. So I told my son the joke, and he had a funny response. So here's the joke. The joke is, I was washing the car with Maximus, my son, yesterday, and he looked up at me. He said, Dad, couldn't you use a sponge? No, that's the whole joke. That's it. There's no more joke. That's the joke. And I tell that joke to my son, and my son didn't laugh for a moment. And then all of a sudden he said, I don't get it, Dad. You never wash the car. Yeah, it's funny in and of itself, but it's funnier when your son doesn't get the joke, but he gets another joke that's funnier than the original joke you told. So here we are. At any rate, happy belated Father's Day to you. Thank you so much. My sister also, I want to add this, sent me a card yesterday, gave me a card yesterday. And the card said, you make other kids jealous that you're not their dad, basically. And what a phenomenal compliment. Because, yes, I'd like to be the dad that other kids say, your dad's really cool. I wish my dad was that cool. That's always my desire as a dad, is to be the good dad, not the nice dad, not the get you everything you want kind of dad, because I'm not that kind of dad. I'm strict. I'm very strict. In fact, if you ask any of my kids what kind of a dad I am, I my guess 2 out of 3, maybe all 3, are going to say he's strict, because I am. I expect my children to measure up, and not expecting anyone, kids or otherwise, to measure up is an insult. On today's Marshall Silver Live, we've got Gary Chupik. Mr. Chupik is an internationally recognized top mental performance coach, And he also is going to teach us today how to unlock performance in professional teams, athletes, business professionals, anybody wanting to take their lives and their businesses to the next level. Gary's unique methods and processes are unprecedented in the sports and business worlds and brings out the very best in each and every client that he has. Gary was recognized recently as one of the top 30 mental performance coaches in the world by his peers. He's got two specialties: his mental performance process and his game plan for life, which is trademarked, by the way, that unlocks whole life excellence in his clients. His clients include some of the most powerful executives in Microsoft, Amazon, Stanford University, Keller Williams, NTT Global, Houston Texans, Seattle Mariners, the FBI, and so much more. He's an expert in mental performance, leadership, and sports psychology. Any topics that involve mindset and mental performance are on the table during today's show. So, with a nice big Marshall Silver, you got a perfect haircut. Welcome, Gary Chupik. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marshall. I was honored to be at one of your seminars and workshops that you did. So this is actually exciting to be here.
Well, that's awesome, man. When was that?
It was probably about a year ago.
Oh, good. In Vegas or Southern California?
It was in Vegas.
Well, awesome, brother. How did you end up at Turning Point?
Yeah, that was a great experience. I ended up, Mark Dove was a friend of mine, and he said, you got to go see Marshall. And so I did. Yeah,
Mark's one of my dearest friends. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So did we meet backstage?
No, we didn't get a chance to do that.
Well, I'm sorry I missed you. Nice to meet you now. Where are you calling in from?
From finally Seattle, Washington. I've been traveling extensively over the last 3 weeks, and so I'm happy to be home.
Well, tell us about that. Where have you been traveling and what have you been doing?
Yeah, so I've been in Madrid, Spain. I probably am going to forget half of them, but Madrid, Spain, Bend, Oregon with the FBI, Kansas City, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Miami, Tampa. I just can't remember them all. So I'm really happy to be home.
Good. Well, welcome home, my brother.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you a dad?
I am. I got to celebrate with my family yesterday. So I got back home from Tampa Bay late Saturday night after being bumped a few times. And so I'm happy to be with them. Yeah, I'm just thrilled to have 3 kids, and they're all great and enjoy them. And like you said, this is about them just as much as it's about us, actually. And so even though they're giving us cards and they're giving us, pats on the back and saying thank yous, really it's about us giving them thanks and appreciating the unique people that they are. And I can relate to this whole idea of having high standards for your kids. Like sometimes they will rub back on us, and they'll resist some of the stuff that we have to say. But in the end, it really is to help them be better people and draw the best out of them.
Well, and for me, I had no idea how much joy there would be in being a dad. How old are your kids?
28, 24, and 20.
So you've been through all this. So today's unique. Today, my son Sterling produces this show, and he's been producing it fairly close to inception. And today he's not here. I've got somebody else that's managing the control panel, and you talked to Adam on the way in. Today, my son leaves for Christian church camp, and so he's gone all week. And it's the first time he's been gone for a week, and it's really been hard for both me and my wife. I was sobbing the other night. I wouldn't tell him that, but I was sobbing, and I wasn't sobbing that he was going away to camp, and I was worried about his safety. I don't know about anybody else. I was sobbing because it kind of represented the end of innocence to me. He's now becoming a young man. He's not my baby. He's not fully dependent upon me. And in fact, this week he's got to be dependent upon himself. And all I want to do as a dad, and I'm sure you're the same way, because I know it's more so for me and probably for you because we're coaches. And so, our task is to make sure people have a really good life. And there's nobody I want to have a really good life more than my children, obviously, or my bride or any of my family, because that's who they are. And so for me, I just kept second guessing myself all week long. I've been going, did you tell him this? Did you remind him of that? Did you give him this strategy? Did you give him that, focus? Did you hand him cologne? Did you make sure that his underwear doesn't have holes in it? And, that was really hard because we had to go out for new underwear. But anyway.
Well, isn't his name Maximus? Is that right?
I have a son named Maximus Silver.
I remember you telling me that. And
and then his oldest brother, the one that's leaving for camp, is Sterling Silver.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's right. I remember you sharing that. Yeah, when you're
So,
younger, you're the caregiver, right? Like that's what you're doing. You're caregiving. And when they get in their teens, you become a little bit more like a coach. And in their late teens, early 20s and 30s, you become consultant.
I pray. Yeah, I pray. You know, again, I know how strict I am, and I know that it's a double-edged sword. That yeah, we get results and they're safe and they haven't broken any bones, knock on wood. And at the same time, though, the bigger challenge for me is just that they don't hate me eventually. That they just love me, and so I constantly, whenever I have to tell them bad news, I say, you know why I'm doing this right now, and all I want them to say is yes, because you love us,
Yeah.
and you want us to be smart, and you want us to be safe. So let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about training. Let's talk about how you've been able to be so massively successful in an area, obviously, that's very near and dear to my heart. The idea that everything is mental. So talk to me about your history. Talk to me about what your work is. Talk to me about what makes you unique.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. I kind of got into the mental performance world through the side door. I was a pastor for 28 years, and I did it both in Salem, Oregon, and in Seattle, Washington. And I'm kind of like you, where I was really frustrated with the church experience. And so I started my own in Seattle, which is really kind of hilarious. But I built it up to 250 or 300 people, and then I ended up getting burnt out. I was just doing too many things. They made me the national director of church planting for my denomination, and I just don't do well within a lot of organizational structures. I just, in some ways, I think I'm unemployable, if that makes any sense. I'm
For
kind
sure.
of independent and want to do my own thing and don't want to build upon other people's things, and so I did that for 28 years and 10 years being a pastor in Seattle, and ran out of gas, and then had a sort of I don't know, I wouldn't call it a dark time, but it was just a quiet time in my life where I needed to reset. Really, that's really the bottom line. And so I could either go out and buy a car, like I don't know, like a Camaro or something. And that was my midlife crisis. And I thought, or I could reinvent myself and try and get in touch with what I really want. And that was an important question for me. Knowing what you want and knowing what you really want can be two totally different things. And so getting in touch with what we really want is really important. That kind of clarity is crucial to go chasing after what you really want, because whatever it is that you really want is going to require dedication and passion. The word passion in Latin means to suffer. So what are you willing to suffer for, or how hard are you willing to chase after something and remove that hesitation so that you can go get what you really want? Because in the end, you got to love it. Whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you're chasing, whatever it is that you really want, you got to really, really enjoy it. So it was just a time for me to reevaluate and recalibrate whatever it is that I wanted. And then once I decided what I wanted, then I just went hard after it. So the last 3 or 4 years have been quite meteoric for me, and that's really wonderful. And I'm just still reaping the benefits of making that decision, and then just kind of going all in and doubling down on the way that I've been created, which I believe is from God. I have a DNA. I have skills and talents that are unique to me. And so a lot of it is just surrendering to the way I have been created and then going for it. I mean, just not holding anything back.
I love that. You know, I started off the show and I didn't know that you had been a pastor, so I didn't say that for your benefit. I love God deeply, and I have seen
Yeah.
miracle after miracle after miracle in my life. And so, as much as I am very pragmatic, I'm very much a scientist when it comes to what my beliefs are, and I need evidence. I do. I need
Mhm.
validation, and so validation of God, 100%,
Mhm.
beyond any kind of argument on my part. I don't care what anybody says to me. I've seen God. I've
Mhm.
experienced God. I've felt God. I know God, but I don't know religion, and
Mm.
there's none, and I want to. I've asked God repeatedly, please help me just know more of the truth. That's all I want to know. I'm not doubting anything. I just want to know the truth.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, all religions fall very short of any kind of scientific evidence. And people say, well, you can't have scientific evidence. And yeah, well, it's a con artist would say the same thing. So, again, I'm open. I just don't necessarily believe that people's interpretation of a particular book of any kind, the Torah, the Bible, you name it, I don't care. I don't think that it doesn't make any sense that it would it would be the rule book. It doesn't make any sense because
Well,
things change.
yeah, you're certainly not alone. And there's a lot of people who feel that way. And to a certain extent, I do as well. And finding out where we fit and where we, like people like you and I, belong, that's kind of hard to do sometimes. So the fact that we can encourage one another, I think is valuable and important.
And so talk to me about that transition from you becoming, and you didn't necessarily say dissatisfied, but disenchanted maybe. Is that an accurate description?
I've been that way my whole life, Marshall. I'm kind of like you, where I'm very critical thinking. I'm very skeptical. I was always sitting in the back row in church growing up, and so I always had sort of a critical eye at everything. And so growing up, I really knew that I probably was never going to work in between the four walls of a church. And eventually I ended up doing that. But I guess for me, it was actually in some ways, I know it's going to sound really strange, but it's just the classrooms that God had me in. And so I had to learn and pass the classes, whatever those were. And I ended up burning out. That's really what ended up. To me, burnout is self-mismanagement. So I felt like I had just really burnt myself out and mismanaged myself. Then I had this time where I thought I need to reevaluate everything. And it was during that time where, I mean, it's a little bit of a story, but you know, in the good book, there's a story in Mark chapter 10 where Jesus sees a blind guy named Bartimaeus. And all along I'm thinking about, man, what's next in my life? What do I do? How do I handle this thing? And so I just keep thinking, like, God, what do you want me to do? What should I do with my life? What do you want me to do? And then I read the words of Jesus asking Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? And that flipped everything around for me, because I thought, wait a minute, maybe I'm waiting for God to answer my question, and maybe God is waiting for me to ask my question and answer his question. So it's like, I don't know, maybe God's asking me, Gary, what do you want? And I just never thought that was ever part of the equation. And so I began to dream for the first time that I could ever remember. And so I thought, well, if I could dream it, here's what I would want. And at that moment, I felt just like you, I'm sure, at different times where you think you hear God's voice, and God says, I'm going to give you whatever you want, Gary. Just ask me for what you want. And so I was so blown away by that sense of freedom that it just sort of changed my life. And even just recently, I was reading in Joshua chapter 1, where God tells Joshua, hey, Joshua, everywhere your foot lands, I'm going to give you. And so I kind of feel like that in my life right now. It's been a crazy last couple of years, but it's been so much fun just to dream again and have fun again and put a spring in my step again. It's just been, I don't know, it's hard to describe how mysteriously joyful my journey has been the last 3 years.
And that's how it should be. So talk to me about your technology. Obviously, you're doing some things most people don't do inside of coaching and helping other people. What makes you unique?
Well, that's a great question. I think in my industry, there's a lot of emphasis on movement and mind and sort of the mind-body connection. And I think kinesiology is an important part of the mind and how our mind and body works. But I think there's something more important than just kinetics. I think it's actually leadership, because what I find that most people in most organizations are lacking in is leadership. And so my unique twist on everything is self-leadership. So I have of the opinion that you don't have to be motivated to do everything. I just don't. I think it's an unnecessary fuel. But if you have it, that's really great. But it's just more of a feeling. But if you can lead yourself and you are very self-determined, and then I think that's probably the holy grail of mental performance. And so I tend to be very sequential and very ingredients based. Like, for example, if you're baking a cake, you can have all the right ingredients, but if you don't sequence it properly, you're not getting a cake. And what I find a lot of people in the mindset or mental performance industry, they talk about mindset, but they actually don't know the specifics of mindset and how to change a mindset and how to grow and build a mindset. So I think the fact that I have a scope and sequence and a system and a process to do that I think is bulletproof. I've never had a client I've worked with not sort of like fulfill a significant portion of their potential. So I think everybody I work with gets better. And I think that's one of the things that makes me unique.
What are the keys to changing mindset?
Well, this is such an interesting question. And so you and I can have a little bit of a conversation about what those ingredients are for a mindset, because if you can figure out the ingredients and the important aspects of a mindset, then I think you're golden. So let me explain just a little bit to your listeners about where mindset comes from. So not to get all psychotherapeutic on us, but our mindset is actually built from the experiences that we have. And from the experiences that we have thoughts and feelings about. And if you put the experience and the thoughts and feelings together, then you get to choose how you respond to those things. When we're younger, we don't as much have a response to them or get to choose our response to them, but still we have a response. And out of all of that, the experience, the thoughts and the feelings and our response, we actually build a belief about ourselves. And if we take all of that, now we have a mindset. And so we can actually change our mindset, especially about our past, because a lot of who we are today comes from our past. If we want to reframe or rewire our minds, we have to go back and visit those experiences and let our older, more mature, wise self whisper into our own ears. Like you can coach yourself. You can whisper into your own ear at those experiences, whether they were positive or negative. And you can literally coach yourself. You can say, you know what? Maybe this person didn't know what they were doing at this time, and that it affected so much of our belief system and our mindset. So for me, when I was younger, I was never a mathematician. That was not my thing. But I had an instructor in school who was really hard on me when I was going through, I think it was called Geotrig. I don't even know what that is today, but I was taking Geotrig. And I hated that class, and my teacher picked on me. And so I grew up with the belief system that I wasn't very smart. But if I could go back to myself and coach myself, I would say, hey, man, Chupik, Geotrig is not your thing. But did you know there are 9 different kinds of intelligence? There's spatial intelligence, there's linguistic intelligence, there's musical intelligence, there is emotional intelligence. There's all these different kinds of intelligence. And you know what, Gary? Math is not yours. So if I could have rewired my brain, and by the way, they weren't teaching philosophy and psychology in high school. Had I have taken philosophy and psychology in high school, my life would have been actually quite different, and I think in a lot of different ways. So now, actually, after graduating with my master's degree with high honors, yeah, I was like, yeah, I mean, that was my thing, but I didn't know that intelligence when I was in high school.
Isn't that kind of the way? I think that ultimately the question is, who were you on the day you were born?
Mm-hmm.
And that our unraveling of the answer to that question is everything. Who were you? One of the things that I really want to be with my children is a guide that helps them step into their natural selves. Nothing made it more clear to me yesterday than writing that letter to each of my children, because they're all very different. And so the letters were very different. And, obviously you have 3 kids, you love them you love them as much as you possibly could love anybody, and you love them all the same, but you love them in different ways for different reasons. And you love some of them more for those reasons than the other ones for that same reason. My son Maximus is massively competitive. He's the most competitive of the 3, and it shows up in everything he does. And I love it about him. And it will take him far to be that competitive. I bought myself a Houdini pinball machine for my birthday. And I love pinball. I love Houdini. I collect Houdini memorabilia. And one of my students knew that I loved Houdini, and he collects pinball machines, called me up, said, hey, I got a Houdini for you. Do you want it? So I bought it. My son Maximus, from the moment I got the pinball machine, has been out there playing it. And all he wants is that when you look at the top scores on the machine, he wants his initials to be in every slot. So I went in there the other day and I beat the lower level, 5th place. I beat 5th place, got on the board. So what does he do when he finds out? Goes out there and annihilates my 5th place to make sure that I'm not on the board anymore.
Of course he did that, right?
So I went out yesterday. I went out yesterday afternoon, and everybody was socializing for Father's Day. I went, I went and played the pinball machine, and his top score was 958,000. My top score now is 1.4 million. Annihilated it. I didn't mean to. I just got in a good run and crushed it. And so I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning to the sound of the pinball machine going off. And I knew what it was. It was my son just standing there frantically working to beat me.
But so, but you know what you did? You tapped into something that makes him better. Like I always say, iron sharpens iron, but only at the right angle, right? And so you found the right angle to unlock him. And every single person can be unlocked.
Yes. And that is it. And that is goes back to the question, who were you on the day you were born? And so that works both ways. Number one, yes, focus on the stuff you're really good at. And usually the stuff you're really good at is the stuff you like doing. That's why you're good at it. You do it a lot. And because you like it. And because you like it, you get better, you like it more. But it's also identifying what you don't like, what you're not good at, and acknowledging I'm not good at this stuff over here, and I'm not good because I don't like it, and I don't want to be good at it. I'm not good because I don't do it very often. And I think that's the harder lesson for people, don't you? That people won't acknowledge I'm not good at this. I don't like doing this. And it can be something as simple and foundational as sales. Some people just don't like sales. And since that's the cornerstone of a business, if you own the business and you don't like sales, guess what? You better find somebody that loves sales or you're going to be out of business. What are your thoughts on helping people in what I call living their natural best life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, helping people discover that. Remember the old school, like you and I are probably similar ages. You're younger than me, but we're probably.
How old are you?
I'm 55. I just turned 55.
Well, God bless you. You just made my day.
Well, imagine back in the day when you would drive those green bicycles with a banana seat, you know.
Oh yes, Schwinn's, baby.
Of course, they were great.
Schwinn with playing cards in the spokes.
Exactly. Of course, Wayne Gretzky playing cards in mine, and so we would have a lock on it, and it would have 4 digits. And I think a lot of life is about figuring out or unlocking those 4 digits. And a lot of it is just you. So I call what I do identity-based performance. I think it is one of the things that makes me very unique in my industry, where I'm not just cookie cuttering, just generic things that you can go chat GPT, but I actually try and find the identity of a person and then try and find how or what angle I can come at to unlock them. So that idea of unlocking identity is crucial. So in my world, this is what it looks like. It's we try to understand your identity. We find your unique purpose. We understand or discover your calling. We understand and discover the vision that you have for your life, the strategy to take you there, the personal philosophy that you need to wake up with every day, and what kind of a plan are you going to give yourself to do that every day. And for me, I call it whole life excellence, because I believe you can be excellent at everything. It just needs to be based on your identity. And if you, let's say, for example, someone is not inclined to work on goals, that's not part of their wiring. In fact, every group that I go to, less than half of the people are really goal driven. So for me as a mental performance coach, I've got to figure out, well, how do I unlock people that are not goal driven? And you might say to yourself, well, why try? Well, because I see it as a challenge. That's why. So if you're not going to be driven by your goals, perhaps you might be driven by your vision that you have for your life. Or you might be driven by rhythms. Instead of goals, have rhythms in your life that always put you in the best position to succeed. So we don't have to be outcome based, but we do need to put ourselves in the best position to succeed. So what are the things that we can do on a repetitive basis, like you mentioned earlier, that put us in the best position to succeed? Because you can throw the best pitch and it still get hit for a home run. You can't control that outcome, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. So whatever that is, you need to do that. And like, for example, I was just chatting with a friend of mine named Sean Kelly, and Sean, he has one of the biggest podcasts in America, just like yours. And
I've been on Sean's show. He's a very nice young man.
Yeah, he is. And I saw him the other day, and I said, hey, talent aside, how much % would you attribute to being in the right rooms and being around the right people? And he said 80%. So yeah, you're right. You can't control outcomes, but you can put yourself in the right rooms. You can put yourself around the right people, and that will definitely elevate your game.
Well, you also said something that's key there. You said, what is the highest likeliness of my success? Where's that going to occur? And it's, kind of like when I talk about God a lot, I probably talk about God as much as I talk about my wife, the two entities I love most in life. And somebody asked me, a very well-known podcast host asked me when I was talking about God, he said, Marshall, you're a hypnotist. You control your brain. You're a very smart guy. Why do you believe in God? And I said, beyond the evidence in my own personal life, I believe in God because strategically it's sound. And he said, what do you mean? I said, there's no downside to believing in God. There's a downside to not believing in God and finding out how God exists, but there's no downside in believing in God and finding out there's no God. There's no downside. So I always say, okay, what would be in my highest and best interest to believe? It's in my highest and best interest to believe that people love me. Even if everybody hated me, and that was a fact, it still would be in my best interest to believe they loved me and be in that bliss. There's no point in believing they hate me, because then I'll just go, do something stupid and end my life. And so people should ask themselves that question on everything. You're working hard all day long. You come home, your wife's lipstick's a little askew. Should you believe she's cheating on you? Or should you believe she's working as hard as you are to take care of the family, and she put it on in a hurry, and that's why it's all smeared?
Yeah.
I, for one, if I wasn't home, there's no point in me believing, at least in that moment, that my wife's got anything, going on. It's better for me to believe, no, my wife loves me. And even if she had something going on, guess what? Me treating her with love and respect might just guilt her out to the point where she stops that nonsense. and so the same thing, I really believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt until they bury themselves.
Great.
Until they talk themselves into a corner or deceive themselves into oblivion. I ask myself that question frequently: what would be best for me to believe? So what do you think? On that note, obviously, you're a high performance coach. You're a mental programming expert. We are living in tumultuous times. I myself am a Trump supporter on a big level. I've shared the stage with Trump on probably about 30 occasions. And I, more than most people, have seen him when nobody else was looking at him, when he had no reason to pretend or posture about who he was. Well, it was just the two of us in the green room. And I know what kind of a man that is. He's a good man, and he's a real man, and he's an honest man. And I think maybe I like him because he's like me, and that he doesn't sugarcoat his opinion. And if people don't like his opinion, at least they know him, and he's not being deceptive, which is why he's the politician. He's the antithesis of most politicians. He doesn't say what he needs to say to be liked. He says what he feels, and if you like him, great. If you don't like him, he says, okay, at least you know me. What's going to happen, in your opinion, or what should we believe? Better question. What should we believe is going to happen in our lives based on the fact this is an election year? And how can we best believe and strategize to take advantage of it?
Wow, that's a really, really important question, especially.
I'm a genius.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's deeper. I mean, there's so many layers to that, right? Like, for example, like you talk about evidence. The evidence in the last, 4 years or so is that our culture is going downhill fast. That there's evidence everywhere. Being in Seattle, you can go to downtown Seattle and witness it for yourself.
No, it's
travel around. I can witness all of that. And so somehow we've replaced the 10 Commandments. We've replaced sort of a religious perspective. You don't even have to be necessarily religious, just common sense. But what we've done is replace a lot of what traditionally over the last 6,000 or 8,000 years has been a foundation for our society, and we've replaced it with something that can't hold the strength and the weight of multiple societies. It's just not working. And I'm Canadian. I'm actually a dual citizen, but I also have a different perspective because I am Canadian, and Canada's going downhill faster than America is. And so you just sort of have to open your eyes and be real, because people have to understand that there's a difference and distinct difference between perception and perspective. A lot of people think they have perspective, but they don't. They just have a perception of what they think is going on. And so we have really the mass media really brainwashing the people and the culture and society into just about any type of conversation. I mean, they want to control the conversation that is taking place by the water cooler at work. They want to control the schools. They want to control all those things. And you just have to be just a little bit smarter to think, man, maybe I'm not being fed all of the truth. And so, the good book says there's two sides to every coin. Sometimes you hear one side and it sounds great, but until you hear the other side, then you should reserve your judgment until you do. And I think that's where we're at. Never tear down a fence unless you know what's on the other side. And so we've deconstructed a lot of society, and it's really been to our deficit. It's actually been to our detriment. So I think we've got to get back to, finding out what's solid. Like, for example, if you only had one car for the rest of your life as a society, if we only had one car for the rest of our lives, how would we treat it? And like this society and this life that we have, man, we better start respecting life, because back in the day, in the 1890s was probably the first time we went from there being a crisis of survival to a crisis of meaning. Okay, so now in our century, we have a crisis of meaning. And that is done, and not answering that question has caused us more disillusionment and more discouragement than anything else in our culture and society. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist for us to figure out, like, things are not going well. And all the things that aren't going well, I don't know if you've noticed this, Marshall, but all the stuff that's not going well politically and socially and culturally in our society isn't being broadcast by the mainstream media. They're hiding as much as they possibly can. So I just think everybody's got to wake up a little bit and take a look at what's going around and bring common sense back again.
Well, I think they've got to be realistic. You know, I had a long conversation yesterday with somebody, and they said, you know, what do you think it is, Marshall? People see evidence stacked on evidence, and they still hold a belief that's so ludicrous that it just you just shake your head. And I said, everybody finds their truth in their time. Cognitive dissonance is a real thing. We don't want to believe that we were wrong for so long, and it's really hard to let go for the normal person when they realize they're wrong. And I think that's the biggest thing going on is you got a lot of people that screamed about this or screamed about that, or worse still, have to justify that they were duped into getting a vaccine and that they were pressured, and they don't want to admit that they were pressured or duped, even though they weren't. It's not their fault. And, you know, I would agree with you on the, you know, observation that Canada is in way worse condition than the US is. And it's not usually that way. Right now, it really is. And I think what it is I think that the deep state, which is not deep state US or deep state Canada, it's deep state global. I think the deep state in some ways uses Canada as a testing ground for the US to see what they can get away with and see what people will tolerate and, you know, what kind of BS that we'll believe. And I think that's where we find ourselves right now is, you're right, mainstream media won't report on what's going on. It won't show that downtown Seattle has become a major war zone. It really has. Most downtowns in California have. And, you know, it's sad. I go down to see a baseball game in downtown San Diego, and you drive through entire neighborhoods of tents and makeshift, you know, structures where homeless people are living. And we were homeless. I'm sensitive to homeless people, but I'm not sensitive to the fact that part of taking charge of that homeless circumstance is to stop normalizing it. Stop making it look like, oh, yeah, we're taking care of our homeless people. No, you take care of homeless people by re-education and helping the ones that want off the street. You don't help them live better on the street by giving them all sorts of supplements and care programs. You give them education and opportunity. But here's the challenge. My mother used to run a homeless shelter. When I retired my mother at 65, the last 20 years of her life, she volunteered at a homeless shelter for free. One day I asked her, what percentage of the homeless people like to be homeless? And I thought, you know, there's probably 5%, 10% that, hey, I like the life. She said it was half.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, half? What do you mean? She said, they like the lifestyle. They don't have to do anything all day long that they don't want to do. If they live in their car, then, you know, they live in their car and they have friends and they hang out. And unfortunately, many of them abuse substances, you know, alcohol and drugs. And she said they're happy. And so they don't want to be. I said, what about the other half? She said they had bad luck. Stuff happened. They couldn't figure out a way out of it, and they just couldn't get a foothold. And I said, those are the ones that I want to speak to. She said, unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword. You know, all the social programs make it easier and easier to be homeless, and so more and more people are homeless. So what do you say is the strategy for stopping the enablement in people and stopping the victory they get from bad behavior?
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say that everybody that's homeless is there because it's their fault. There are people, we were certainly those people that are homeless because of, you know, bad circumstance. The father left, or one of the breadwinners left. Maybe they got fired from a job. Maybe, you know, the government was unfair. Any number of reasons. But there's also people that remain in a circumstance that a little bit of thought and initiative would get them out of. And that was always my mom. So what are your thoughts about the enablement, and how do we stop that from happening?
Well, we certainly are talking about mindsets, aren't we? Because I'm going to say something that is really culturally sensitive, but I don't really care. So I'm going to say it anyway. And that is, as long as we're teaching victimhood, then we're in trouble. And it's the same thing for professional athletes. It's the same thing for college athletes. It's the same thing for young adults and young people. If you are teaching and reinforcing victimhood, you're in real trouble. And that's where we are as a society today. So at least in my own mind, this is how I think of it. If you're going to teach victimhood, then you're going to teach people to feel helpless. And if you teach people how to feel helpless long enough, they'll feel hopeless. If you teach someone how to feel hopeless long enough, they'll get deeply discouraged. If they're discouraged long enough, they'll get depressed. If they're depressed long enough, they will become suicidal. And if you look at the number one problem, and I've talked to, even in my school district, I've talked to the superintendent, the number one issue is depression and suicide and anxiety. Well, three things: depression, suicide, and anxiety. So as long as you teach people that they're victims and they can't really do much about whatever it is that they're facing, especially on a global scale, not just local, but especially on a global scale, you will totally remove the drive and energy out of young people. And so my job and your job is to infuse that meaning back into young adults. And you do that by teaching self-leadership and self-autonomy. And, that's not very popular, but that's the truth. And so your life is determined by your strongest thoughts. The direction of your life is determined by your strongest thoughts. So why not have really healthy, positive thoughts about your own life and who you are so that you can move forward in your life? Because if you can't lead yourself, then you can't lead another person. If you can't lead another person, you'll never lead a group. If you don't lead a group, you'll never lead a department. If you never lead a department, you'll never lead an organization. And if you never lead an organization, you're never going to lead a movement. And that's called the leadership pyramid that I teach. Everything is dependent upon that bottom layer, that self-leadership. If you don't have that, it's game over. Because if you're not able to lead yourself, you'll destroy an organization, because all those stress fractures that you're going to cause because of your lack of integrity and character and that lack of self-leadership is always going to come back and bite you. And it'll not just bite you, it'll bite the entire organization. That's why a company like Boeing, no one's ever going to pluck their CEOs and their C-suite execs. No one's ever going to do that. You know why? Because they all pass the buck. And so they fail the character and integrity test. And that's what we've got to teach again at the very bottom of every organization. It's really depends on the character and integrity of the leaders of an organization. Don't do that, you're going to send stress fractures up the entire organization.
And isn't that the case that obviously there's a song by Kenny Loggins that I love. One of the lyrics, it's, I met a man who knew where he was going and he invited everyone to come along.
Yeah.
And, obviously that's leadership, but I think that most people don't realize if you don't create a vision, you will absolutely become a part of somebody else's vision.
Yep.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Way less responsibility, way less pressure. Life is easier if you're not the one with the vision. If you're the one with the vision, guess what? You're responsible for the vision's outcome. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not getting more of what you want, I get frustrated with teammates all the time that don't stop and be conscious of what the consequence of whatever they're doing or not doing is. And I just shake my head. And sometimes I'll have a teammate that I'll have to ask a question 3 or 4 times of the same question to get to the answer. And it's like, what was the reason you didn't just give me the answer? What was the reason it took 4 interactions to get something that I was clearly asking you for? Mm-hmm. Because they didn't want to give up the answer. It wasn't comfortable because the answer was that they had fallen short. They hadn't finished what they were supposed to be doing. And I do think that there has to be a culture of it's okay to screw up. Mm-hmm. It's okay to mess up. I'd rather you messed up and did something poorly than didn't do anything for fear of messing up. Now that you messed up, we know, gosh, that doesn't work. Yeah, it cost me a little bit of money, but it cost me the same amount of money for you not to do anything and for us not to learn anything. Mm-hmm. And again, we're launching a very large project. And my wife, when I was telling her what I wanted to do, she said, what about government scrutiny? I said, we could launch a little project that became a $1 billion project, and that alone is going to generate government scrutiny. There's no way around it. What you got to do is play the game so squeaky clean that even when you're scrutinized, you go, look, scrutinize me all day.
There you go.
Do whatever you need to do. There's nothing to find. And I think that's where Trump finds himself, is that, he's smart enough to know, don't operate in the gray. I don't operate in the gray. I don't do anything. It's black or it's white. Either I did it or I didn't. And again, I'm one of those people, put cameras on me 24/7. I don't mind. I'm the same in the dark as I am in the light. Does everybody like me? Absolutely not. Why would they? Except I also know they don't like me for the right reason, because they don't like the real me. And I think that that's, again, it's biblical. The truth shall set us free. I think that's where we're getting to. This country has, this world has a fever, and the fever is about to get worse, because it always does, before it gets better. And when the fever breaks, what happens is then we're left with recovery, and recovery isn't back to as good as it gets. It's just a removal of the virus, the thing that was causing the fever. You still have to recover. And I don't think everybody wants that. Some people don't want to open up their eyes and realize they're in the matrix. They want to think, no, this is real life, and this is joyful. No, we're in the matrix right now, without a doubt. And I don't think the Matrix was fiction. I actually think the Matrix was in many ways very descriptive of our world, and metaphoric for sure, except what I think the pod is this dumbed down hypnotic trance that the majority of the population walks around in all the time, because it's easier than dealing with reality. How do we get people out of that state of dumbness? And there's no other way to describe it. It's that woke state. It's that state where they're still wearing masks in their car by themselves, where they're listening to the government, getting their flu shot, where they're believing that everything that's happening is that they see. It's got to be real. It's on the news. How do we get people out of this ridiculously woke state that's killing all of us?
Well, I mentioned earlier about character and integrity, and that starts within us, right? But once it starts in us and we buy that, then we can be that for our family, especially our spouse. And then we can be that in our family. Then we can be that in our community. And then we can be that in our city, state, and country, and actually even to the point where we're global citizens. But it starts with us. So until we start speaking truth, and just insinuating in every situation that we're in that we are pursuing the truth, then we're never going to arrive at it. It's almost like what's happened in our culture is like going to the doctor and getting, misdiagnosing the problem. And so the problem is misdiagnosed. And so what we're doing is providing medications for the wrong problem. And so the world's view of answering these problems or responding to these problems is to give up just tons of medications. And I don't mean literally, I just mean figuratively, offering solutions that aren't ever addressing the original problem. And so until we realize that we're the problem and we've got to step up our game with character and integrity, I'm not sure anything will change, because right now what we're doing is putting people in positions of leadership that don't deserve to be there, because they've skipped over the self-leadership, the couple leadership, the group and department, organizational leadership. And they just say, well, I have a voice, I'm going to be a leader. No, you're not. No, you're not. Those things are earned. People have to earn our respect, don't they? It shouldn't be given to them on a platter. And so I believe that you have to earn respect as a person and as a leader.
Well, and isn't that the case that, we've got here in the States, and that's all I can really observe. Certainly it's the same other places. You've got people that are, as you said, they're career politicians, they're career leaders without having actually led anything. And so you've got bartenders becoming a part of our politics. You've got in due respect, foreign exchange students who had 128 days of political experience before they're nominated to be president, and then going on to be president with no real experience on building anything.
Exactly.
No real leadership experience whatsoever, and getting elected 100% because of the color of their skin, not because of their track record, because they had none. And again, this isn't me espousing politics right now. This is an outside observer saying, no, you got people like a Joe Biden who have been in politics 50 years. You can't put your finger on one positive thing that human being has done. And so, if we're to select leaders based upon popularity, we're the idiots for sure. But then the second part of it is, are we actually doing anything, or is everything just a big theater, as Billy might say, all the world a stage? And so where are we? Is our elections both in the US and Canada simply shams right now? And if they are, how do we stop that? And if they aren't, how do we trust them?
Well, there are certainly a group of people who thought that the way to get to America is through internally. And so in the 1960s and 70s, it's just my opinion, but in the 1960s and 70s, there's a group of people that started to infiltrate our schools and universities because students were vulnerable. They just didn't know. And so if you teach them and you use certain language that sounds good, but isn't good, but it sounds good, they certainly don't have the discernment to be able to refute those things. And so we're pretty much like, you know, the roosters come home, right? Like this is where we're at right now. And so I think it's got to start back at the educational level. And if people like don't want their kids to be exposed to certain things, they should pull them out of school and educate yourself, or find another organization to teach your kids, because the public school system is not exactly the prime space to do that.
Well, you talk about it, you know, the challenge with teens in general, but kids all across the board, is they're more confused than they've ever been because they're given more BS every single day. The indoctrination inside of our public school system is criminal right now. And, you know, we homeschool our kids, and and my kids have friends, and their friends are in public school. And I see behaviors that I say that's 100% indoctrination. They didn't come up with that on their own. Somebody whispered in their ear. And so for me, one of the pet projects that we've got going on right now is something I call the Young Entrepreneur Society.
Oh, I love that.
And my belief is that you don't have time to be depressed if you've got things to do, if you've got outcomes to create. And so, you know, filling a kid's head up with confusing information. Am I a girl? Am I a boy? I don't know. Drop your trowel, look in your shorts. Do you have a penis or a vagina? There's your answer. But I think that the bigger challenge is it goes beyond that gender confusion that they're intentionally creating in children these days to make sure that they're off balance and can be easily controlled. But it goes beyond that of confusing kids about everything, confusing kids. Evil is good, good is evil. You know, the enemy is our friend and the friend is our enemy. My children, again, I want them to know the truth, and you can raise your kids any way you want. I don't want my kids to have any more burden than they need. So for me, gender identity, yeah, it's an important thing to have. And it's not that hard to help a kid not be confused. It really isn't that hard. And then whatever they choose to do as adults, that's their choice. They're right. I fully support 100% of that. Just don't confuse the kid today. And I think that is the general population is left in so much confusion on a regular basis that it's just more comfortable to just go with the flow, not rock the boat. You know, I here in the States, and obviously you have the advantage of observing two very different countries, very different cultures responding in very similar ways. And, you know, when people tell me, well, the majority of the population believes X, my response is, no, they don't. The majority believes Y, but X, the minority, is very loud and mean. Agreed. And Y is very polite, and so they just smile and nod. But you get us together in a private room where we can kind of feel it out. No, we're not rocking the boat. You find out what our real opinion is, and our real opinion is not what the popular mainstream media would have you believe. What do you think?
Agreed. You know, but that's where we are in our society, and we're not teaching. I mean, when's the last time you heard of a critical thinking skills class in school and in college, right? Like it's just kind of comical. And so they don't want,
or even a flat out money making class.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's no class in high school or college that says, here's how you make money. Here's how you pay your bills. Here's some financial opportunities. And so for me, my kids come back, you know, and they say, hey, Dad, I want to take saxophone. I want to take piano. I want to take gymnastics, jujitsu, baseball, basketball, whatever. And it all comes with a cost. But the day my kid shows up and says, I want to learn how to be an entrepreneur, there's this class over here. You don't have to pay for it. In fact, they don't charge anything for the class. They just want kids to understand you don't have to wait until you're an adult to be an entrepreneur.
Agreed. And we have a lot of mobility, you and I, and people like you and I, we have a lot of mobility because we have stability at home and we have stability in our lives. And that stability provides the mobility. But if you keep people poor and questioning and feeling helpless and hopeless and, depressed and discouraged, yeah, they're not going to have that stability. And so I think there's an intentional effort to keep things unstable. And I have a pretty strong conviction, and you may find this interesting, but I'm revealing more than I normally say, but I really believe that the end game is to renegotiate the Constitution of the United States. It happened recently in Brazil, and well, pardon me, Argentina. It happened recently in Argentina, and it was sort of like, oh, that really proves it. When you get two sides or multiple sides in a culture, society, or country fighting against each other, you're giving one side more power than they deserve. And so if you create enough chaos, and then there'll be some negotiations because they want to create that type of conflict and turmoil, and then they'll have bargaining power. Right now, there's a certain element of our culture that doesn't have enough power to overturn the Constitution. But if we give them the power to do that, that's what they will do. And so I think the end game is to renegotiate the Constitution of the United States. And I don't think that's a good thing.
And I think the end game, being a hypnotist, I think the end game is to make people want to be controlled. And, that ultimately is what most people do in any area they don't know. We teach people how to invest, and specifically how to invest in mortgage notes. And the number of people, when we say, look, we'd like to teach you how to invest in mortgage notes, the number of people that say, I don't want to learn, I just want you to do it for me, is about half. About 50% just say, you know what, as much as I believe in what you're teaching, I believe in, the vehicle you're using, notes, mortgage notes, but I also don't want to learn, so just go do this for me. I think that done for you concept is prevalent in every area of our lives. I think that's part of the reason people put their kids in public school, not only because it's easier and it's cheaper and it's available, but I think they also, even if they had the money and the time and the ability, they don't know what to do. And so much of our lives are, gosh, I don't know. I don't want to take the time to learn this, so just do it for me. And obviously dangerous. So when we teach investors how to invest in notes, yeah, we can manage the portfolio, but we won't manage the portfolio until the person has gone through the educational program, so they know why we're doing what we're doing and can never come back and say, you were out of alignment. Our response is, you saw what we were doing. We disclosed everything. We never held anything back. You knew what was good and what wasn't. You agreed to this. I think that's important, is that people have that education. And I think right now they don't know. Honest people think everybody's honest. Dishonest people believe everybody screws everybody, so there's no harm in me doing it. It's what everybody does. And again, the challenge is, good people, we don't think like that. We don't, I see people mistreating their children, and I just look at that and I say, how could you do that? How is that even possible? How do you sleep one wink with the way you treat those human beings that didn't ask to be here? You invited them in. They didn't ask to be here. And I don't get it. I see people being nasty in general population to each other. And I just think, how does your world work if that's how you act?
Well, you and I are talking at the end of the day, like you just mentioned, it's about control, right? So the game plan for life and elite mindset is about giving people an opportunity to take back control of their lives. That's ultimately what it's about. It's about the autonomy of the individual, and it's not at the expense of a larger group of people. I understand that some of those things have to be in tension, but ultimately having a mindset and having a game plan for your life, like a whole life excellence, is about you just taking control of your life. And that's what I love about what you're doing, right? You're giving people an opportunity to take control back of their life.
Well, you have seen some of the comments popping up on the screen while we have had our conversation. They love you, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. And I invite you to come back to Turning Point again now that we're friends. Please come back again. You'll have a different experience there, and I'd love to be able to point you out to the audience and just let them know we got excellence in the room. We got the next one coming up next month in July in Las Vegas. So if you have the 16th through the 18th available, man, I would love to have you come. I'd love to get to know you better. Before we wrap up, first and foremost, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, yeah, thank you for that. It's Gary at EliteMindsetNation.com, because I'm creating a nation of high performers. So I appreciate that. Gary at EliteMindsetNation.com. They can always find me online on Instagram at Elite Mindset. And yeah, the thing I would probably leave you with is that you're in far more control of your life than you think you are.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. God bless you. Happy Father's Day. Keep up the great haircut, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
All my best.
Take care, brother. Life is good. Hey, if you like the show, tell your friends. I really would love that support. Tell your friends that we get together live every single day. Huge news coming down the pipe. I can't even tell you what it is yet, but we got huge news coming. We got a lot of events going on this coming month. We have Turning Point, of course, coming up. We've got an Inner Circle event. If you are an Inner Circle member that has not yet attended, or if you want to reattend Inner Circle, we got 2 seats left, I know, at that event. We have a Crush It from the Stage event going on. And in fact, this particular Crush It from the Stage event is going to be a great one. I'm working really hard right now to set up an opportunity for you to watch me while we're teaching the Crush It from the Stage event at another person's event going on simultaneously, and watch me crush it from the stage. Watch me close 60, 80, 90% of an audience live while I'm teaching the class, so that you can see how you can do it too, and have yourself some strong 6-figure, even 7-figure weekends. And then finally, we've got our we've got a best event going on, our first Prosperity Alliance best event happening also next month. So lots of events, lots of chance to learn, and I certainly would love to see you. I am Marshall Silver. We are here every single day, 10 a.m. live, same time tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye for now. Hey there, moguls. It's me, Marshall Silver, your personal millionaire maker. Getting very excited about my brand new show coming up 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm going to broadcast live to you. I'm going to give you content, information, emotional, mental, physical, and even spiritual power. I'll also invite some of my cool multi-millionaire and billionaire friends onto the show to give you more direction, more advice for having it all. All the knowledge to get everything you want and so much more. All you got to do is log in to the show to get information coming to you live from the bunker right here at Studio Money. So stay tuned.